the dangerous, deadly seductress of film noir. She was the definition of mystery, the dangerous allure. But that was Lizabeth Scott in the spotlight. What about Lizabeth Scott behind the scenes? That's a different story, one that even those involved shudder to talk about. A story of undisguised hatred, of tangible fear, of whispered rumors of dark magic and unexplained tragedy. Why did Burt Lancaster, a macho icon, turn down lucrative roles 3 times just because he knew he would have to act opposite her? Why was Lucille Ball, the comedy queen beloved by the entire nation for her friendliness, ousted from the lead role by her? Why was the powerful producer Hal B. Wallace so obsessed with her that he controlled everything and then fell into heartbreak when she left? And most horrifying of all, why did illness and death seem to always find those with whom she had close ties, from stage rivals to her wealthy fiancé? Was it just a cruel coincidence of fate? Or was there some dark force at work, with Lizabeth Scott at its center? Lizabeth Scott, born Emma Mazzo in a small town, she refused to settle for a normal life. Even as a young girl, the fire of ambition burned. Changing her name to Lizabeth Scott was more than a change of name. It was a declaration of abandoning her past, creating a new identity, a star destined to conquer the world. That ambition was quickly tested on the harsh Broadway stage. And right here, in a fiery confrontation with the legendary Tallulah Bankhead, the first signs of Lizabeth Scott willing to do anything to achieve her goals were revealed. When she was chosen to be Bankhead's stunt double in The Skin of Our Teeth, Scott wasn't just waiting for an opportunity. She allegedly, quickly, formed a sexual relationship with producer Michael Meyerberg. It was a bold and risky move. Was it love at first sight? Or was it a carefully calculated strategy to gain support, to put pressure on Bankhead, the man Meyerberg was trying to tame? According to Bankhead and many witnesses, Scott was not naive. She was described as an opportunist who saw a shortcut to the leading role through seducing someone in power. This action not only violated the unspoken rules, but also showed a disregard for professional ethics from the very beginning. And then, the suspicious coincidence, Bankhead fell ill with a stomach ulcer and had to leave the role. Although there is no evidence that Scott was directly involved, for those who witnessed the tension and the complicated relationship, this was Scott's first victory by a less than honorable means. And the shock of Meyerberg choosing Miriam Hopkins over Scott after Bankhead left. However, Hopkins also suddenly fell ill, and Scott eventually got the part, and whispers of strange luck, even magic, arose once again. The two main rivals suffered health problems at the time Scott needed the opportunity most. It was these thorny experiences on Broadway that shaped the tough, somewhat callous Lizabeth Scott, who perhaps believed that the ends justified the means. She learned that, in this world, talent alone was not enough. Cunning, determination, and sometimes even cruelty were also required. She took that lesson with her to Hollywood, where power, money, and temptation were even greater. Hal B. Wallace, the source of power and resentment, the appearance of Hal B. Wallace in Lizabeth Scott's life was a fateful turning point. Wallace was not only the most powerful producer at Paramount, he was also the person who was obsessed with Scott. Their relationship, although never publicly acknowledged as a love affair, was the golden key that opened the door to Scott's fame, but at the same time it was also the main source of her hatred. Hal B. Wallace did not hesitate to use his power to openly support Scott. He gave her good roles, ensuring that she always had a prominent position. This favoritism went against the rules of hierarchy and fairness in the industry, causing great dissatisfaction among others. The Stanwyck War, the strange love of Martha Ivers. This is the most typical and outrageous example. Barbara Stanwyck is a monument, a superstar with a proven seniority and talent. Wallace's use of lawyers, interference in the filming process, cutting Stanwyck's screen time just to put Scott on equal footing is an insult to Stanwyck and a blatant violation of Hollywood's unspoken rules. Instead of being humble or feeling guilty towards Scott, she accepted and benefited from this favor. This action was seen as complicity, as evidence that she was willing to trample on the honor of a respected senior to advance. Wallace's power was not only helped Scott land roles, but also protected her from negative consequences. People were afraid to confront Scott directly for fear of upsetting Wallace, who had the power to shape their careers. This created an atmosphere of fear and powerlessness around Scott. She seemed to be able to do anything with impunity. It was Hal B. Wallace's excessive and somewhat unfair patronage that was at the root of Lizabeth Scott's dislike. Her colleagues were not only jealous of her rapid success, but also resented the way she achieved it by relying on a powerful relationship, breaking the rules, and hurting others. They saw her as the embodiment of injustice in the industry. The initial dislike gradually turned into a stronger feeling as Scott's actions and their consequences became increasingly clear. The two incidents with Burt Lancaster and Lucille Ball were the climax, firmly cementing the nickname "the threat" for Lizabeth Scott. Burt Lancaster's reaction was not simply dislike. It was disgust and fierce avoidance. That a leading male star, the symbol of strength, would be reluctant to kiss Scott and then cancel his contract 3 times to avoid having to act with her was extremely unusual and alarming. Several theories have been put forward. It is possible that Scott had an extremely unpleasant, domineering personality or had inappropriate behavior behind the scenes that Lancaster could not stand. His hard labor reference was a reference to the fatigue and stress of having to interact with her. Perhaps Lancaster had witnessed or learned of Scott's tricks, the dark side of how she treated others or how she and Wallace manipulated things, which made him feel disgusted and want to stay away. Or perhaps Lancaster did not want to get involved in the complicated and powerful relationship between Scott and Wallace, fearing that he would become a victim or get caught up in unnecessary trouble. Whatever the reason, Lancaster's silence only added to the mystery and fear. It implicitly confirmed that there was something very wrong, very dangerous about Lizabeth Scott that people dared not speak out. His actions were the strongest warning to the rest of Hollywood. Lucille Ball. The demotion of Lucille Ball in Easy Living was a serious image mistake. Ball was America's sweetheart, a symbol of fun and friendliness. Making enemies of her meant going against the sentiments of an entire industry and the public. This action showed that Scott and Wallace seemed to no longer care about public opinion or the feelings of others. They were willing to sacrifice a beloved star to serve Scott's ambition. It firmly cemented the nickname, "the threat." She was not only a threat to the careers of direct competitors, but also a threat to the gentle, unrelated people. She became a symbol of ruthlessness and disregard. After these incidents, Lizabeth Scott was not only hated, she was feared. People began to keep their distance, not daring to get involved. Her isolation increased, even though she continued to have successful roles under Wallace's patronage. Mysterious illnesses and deaths. This is perhaps the most haunting and controversial aspect of the Lizabeth Scott story. Throughout her career and life, a series of unfortunate events, mainly illness and sudden death, befell those connected to her, especially those who stood in her way or were close to her. Tallulah Bankhead and Miriam Hopkins. As mentioned, both of Scott's main rivals on Broadway fell ill at extremely convenient times for her. While it may have been a coincidence, this repetition sowed the first suspicions. Others? Although no specific list has been documented, Hollywood gossip has it that there were other cases of people who suffered health problems or career decline after having conflicts or competing with Scott. These rumors, despite the lack of evidence, contributed to a black legend. William Duggar. The sudden death of her fiancé, William Duggar, just before their wedding was the most shocking event and the strongest reinforcement of Scott's real-life femme fatale image. The details of Duggar's death were not widely publicized, only described as mysterious, which further fueled speculation. And the appearance of a handwritten, legally ambiguous note, giving Scott half of Duggar's estate just before his death was so movie-like that people couldn't help but suspect a compromise or something shady. William Duggar's death caused his sisters to strongly protest and eventually win the lawsuit, showing that they completely distrusted Scott and suspected that something was wrong. Although Scott was not charged with a crime and did not receive any property, the incident severely damaged her remaining reputation. It turned the rumors, and the bad luck turned into suspicion of her direct involvement in the death of her lover. The image of a woman who brought misfortune, even death, to the men who loved her became clearer than ever. Rationally, it was possible that it was all just a coincidence. Illness and death are a part of life. Hollywood is a stressful, high-pressure environment, which can contribute to health problems. However, the repetition of this motif, especially at important moments in Scott's career or personal life, made it difficult to ignore. In an environment that was already rife with competition, jealousy, and even superstition, these coincidences were easily exaggerated and interpreted in the most negative light, especially when they happened to someone with a bad reputation like Scott. People began to see her as an omen, a person who brought bad luck. The fear was no longer just of losing roles or being played, but also a vague fear that something bad might happen if you were too close to her. Lizabeth Scott's gay rumors and confidential lawsuit, the accusation of homosexuality, and the failed lawsuit only added to the complexity and isolation of Scott. In that era, being considered gay was enough to ruin a career. Her losing the lawsuit led many to believe that the accusations were true, or at least that she had something to hide. Her absolute secrecy about her personal life, even in self-defense, only fueled curiosity and speculation. So, why was Lizabeth Scott so hated and feared? It was a combination of many factors. Ambition and means actions, like those in the Bankhead, Stanwyck, Miller cases showed that she was willing to use any means, even those considered unethical, to advance her career. Wallace's blatant favoritism created resentment and a deep sense of injustice in the industry, making Scott a target of hatred. Her constant hurting or undermining of colleagues, even beloved ones like Stanwyck and Ball, made her appear dangerous and unbounded. Lizabeth Scott was a talented woman trapped in a twisted system of power, a film noir icon whose real life was more dramatic than her films, a legend shrouded in both admiration and fear. What do you think of Lizabeth Scott? Leave your comments below. We hope you find this video helpful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching this video, and see you in the next videos. Bye.